Hey everybody. Sorry about that. I clicked the wrong button and clicked now instead of in 30 seconds. Can you all hear me? Wonderful. Thanks, Jonathan. Awesome. Thank you all for coming back and quick little break there. Just a quick reminder, ChainSafe is hiring. We're looking for Rust, Go, TypeScript, or DevOps engineers. Feel free to go to chainsafe.io/careers. And you'll find some listings there. It'll always be updated, and feel free to reach out. We're always looking to take on new and awesome people. Location does not matter. Awesome. So hopefully you guys have all had a good first kind of like start to the morning. Had some really good talks to kick us off. And super excited to get into our next speaker. Another really good dear friend of ChainSafe's. He is a partner and advisor at Hypersphere, Jack Platts. And Jack, you have been promoted. So feel free to unmute your mic. Oh, maybe you weren't. Never mind, just got you up there.
Can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, loud and clear. The stage is yours, and feel free to kick it.
Thanks, Greg. Cool. Hi, everybody. My name is Jack Platts. I'm currently a co-founder and partner at Hypersphere Ventures, and I'm going to give a talk today entitled "Why People Care," which is probably a big philosophical question, but the subtext is building a successful cryptocurrency ecosystem, and then a little bit of kind of the community around such an ecosystem. What makes someone want to join an ecosystem, an open source ecosystem? Why someone would want to evangelize a certain cryptocurrency or participate, be it in governance, some of the participatory functions and like mining and staking and liquidity mining and all these different things, storing files, right? What really inspires somebody to want to get involved? So a little bit about the projects I've been working on the past 3 or 4 years in crypto. Polkadot was kind of the first project I worked on most particularly in full time for several years, and out of that kind of launched the Kusama project about 1.5 years ago, and started Hypersphere Ventures about 1 year ago and moved to that full time. We partner and early with entrepreneurs launching projects and then help them kind of decentralize, grow, and get adoption in their communities. And we participate deeply in these communities. So working hard with the founders and trying to do anything we can to help grow. I think a theme of this talk and a theme at Hypersphere is we definitely, we put ventures on here in part because it's easier to Google and find us that way. But it's almost like Hypersphere projects because there is this necessity for successful cryptocurrencies to have a really robust and dynamic community, and that's made up of people, right? And you can be a capital provider, a VC, a capital provider.
Hey Jack, just sorry to interject. Did you have slide deck? Just because it's not sharing the screen here.
Oh, sorry. Yep.
No worries. Just wanted to let you know before you got too deep into it.
Okay, sorry about that. That was my first slide. Here's my second slide. Here's some of our projects. Thank you for that. So where I was kind of getting, you got to participate in these communities, right? And people have to want to participate. And so we take that seriously at Hypersphere, and we did obviously at Web3 Foundation launching some of these projects. So here's a couple ecosystems that I'm going to use as examples. Obviously, the more mature ones, most mature ones, Bitcoin. Very mature one is Ethereum, and then kind of growing, budding ecosystems that are still working out some of these things, but definitely have, I think, the support and awareness to be really important, more ossified ecosystems with mature narratives like a Bitcoin and more Ethereum. I use kind of Polkadot and Filecoin as examples in this presentation as potential ecosystems that have done this really well and wanted to get people involved. I think the difference between launching an ecosystem, they all have differences, right? The difference between launching an ecosystem like Bitcoin and everything that came with that over a decade ago is now quite different than what you see today. And I'm not sure how long, much longer, you're going to continue to be able to launch these open source crypto communities. I hope a really long time. So similarities. So the name of this talk is why people care, right? Building a successful cryptocurrency ecosystem. And I think there's some similarities to glean from the previous 3 ecosystems I mentioned, and then potentially some differences. So you have to be able to get started. So in the next slide I put capital in quotes, because capital is really in some senses human capital as well as financial capital to get started, right? In the case of Bitcoin there was 0. In the case of Ethereum, Filecoin, and Polkadot, there's that large sums of capital upfront to build the idea, but it takes some resources, right? Thinking big, I think, is really important, right? Like, I use this for examples, but another one is Chainlink in some respects, right? It's this idea of connecting the real world and the physical world and all the data, connecting them, right? It's this kind of massive vision once you get into it, and replacing central banks, early meme and Bitcoin. That's kind of a really big vision, right? Or this world computer where you can run any program that you could ever think of. So it's kind of getting it's going for such a big market, right? This is kind of fundraising 101 in VC. They have to think they're going to want 100x, right? And like launching a cryptocurrency is very much the same. Instead of the VCs is the crowd rather than Sand Hill Road or whatnot. I think this is me personally. I think a commitment to the bazaar rather than the cathedral is really important, and having open source, the nature of open source, not just open source code, but like the values behind open source permeate everything you do. People aren't going to want to, people don't want to get involved with Facebook and Uber, right? It's as we know it in the Web3 sense, where there's a gradient, or there's a lot of gray between users and service providers in Web3 versus kind of if you work for Facebook, right? And it's like it's your full-time job, right? You can't do that on the side, but you can very much do that on the side in these cryptocurrency ecosystems, which is new. And it's been evolving that way in different ways with the gig economy and different things, but with Bitcoin, for example, in Filecoin, it's taken more literally. You have to have leadership, obviously, whether that's leadership for the first 3 years, like with a Satoshi, where he was involved in that in the Bitcoin community, or Vitalik, who's still involved 5, probably 10 years down the line, he'll still be involved. Gavin and Juan for Polkadot and Filecoin, right? They're competent technically, and then have either surrounding them or themselves an ability to articulate this really big vision, and then also like some sort of commitment to the community as well, and in articulating it, right? Because you have to go out there in front of people and evangelize this this ecosystem you're building. I think the devolvement of power, right, from the center is really important. Once, like Satoshi did this in his own way, Ethereum Foundation, I'll get into in a little bit, did this in their own way, with multiple organizations popping up around it. We're seeing that a lot in Polkadot now, right? I left one of the instigating organizations at Web3 Foundation, started Hypersphere, which is kind of a Polkadot-focused VC right now. And can the ecosystem support that, right? I don't know if it's causal or not, but it's definitely an emergent effect of a successful, healthy ecosystem. Whenever there are different leaders in the ecosystem able to create their own vision, create their own technologies, create their own companies, right? And then the meme, over time, the headless brand folks, if anyone's in the audience have seen that, that website, they do a great job of explaining this through this market protocol fit, and I'll get into that here in a bit. A little bit of the differences, right? Why nobody cares. The flip side to why everybody cares, and then you have these ecosystems that launch, and they should have it, right? They raised a bunch of money. They do maybe have a really smart leader. So what's the deal? Why aren't they getting adoption? Why aren't people wanting to get involved? Why aren't people telling their friends to get involved, right? Why aren't people wearing that logo or getting that logo tattooed to them? A couple reasons, I think, right? I think a lot of it comes from an idea of something being artificial or something not being authentic. And a lot of things can make that even worse, right? Make that inauthenticity worse. So pay to play is an obvious one where you pay for your community, you pay people to do stuff, and it becomes transactional, and people know if it's being transactional. It's not like a perfect rule about this. It's just where is your intention coming from in building this ecosystem, building this community, and people can see that, whether they know it consciously or not, they feel it. And another one is getting stuck in this continuum from an idea to being a fully decentralized network. You get stuck somewhere in that progressive decentralization pattern, or that progressive decentralization kind of continuum, and you can't reach escape velocity because the tech doesn't really provide that much utility. You haven't been able to distribute the token well. Like, there's a bunch of different things, right, of why leadership wouldn't be able to take that early project to escape velocity. There's not enough resources to go around in the ecosystem, and then it's restricted. Like, who can participate in this ecosystem when is really important for an ecosystem's health. If you're not, if you're in the public, if you're getting a raw deal and you're contributing much later because the code hasn't been open source, because the token sale was never accessible, and there's some very real regulatory reasons to why those things might be the case, or competitive reasons why that might be the case. But I'd argue that it's important to take those risks, as well as to be open. And then novel vision. Like, a lot of times someone's just like, I'm going to do this because I can do this, and there's not this technical folks. I'm not super technical myself, but more technical folks sometimes just build stuff because they want to, and it doesn't connect to some massive vision, and that's okay too, absolutely. But if you're going to build a really robust ecosystem that has longevity, I'd argue it has to link to some bigger idea, right? And I'll get into each of these individually, but so I said first, one of the first things you need is some capital, some resources, and all of these things from the first slide are linked together of how you get towards this escape velocity, how you get to decentralization, whatever you want to call it. And it starts with how you get people involved, how and when you get people involved. And if you get people, and I'm sorry I released this decent graph of token distributions at Genesis. Your Genesis block is, if you're launching a blockchain, is solidified. You can't change your Genesis block. There's still, community their Genesis block and have never been able to get over it, right? And so it's important to, and this connects to how open source, if open source as a value permeates everything you do, when can people get involved? I'd argue more often, sooner the better, and on equal footing. It's always fun to remember Bitcoin raised $0, right? It's something people forget sometimes whenever we've been trying to build these massive Web 3.0, with hundreds of millions of dollars, which maybe it takes right now. I don't know. There's arguments on both sides, but Bitcoin didn't need that. Another really good example is, I'd be remiss not to mention YFI. You're in finance. It didn't really raise any money for the Wi-Fi token. So, and it's a top 30 blockchain, but people could get involved. So this idea of market protocol fit, going after such a massive market that it can, you can put society on this blockchain, right? That was kind of the vision of Ethereum. And quickly we realized that wasn't true once people tried to. But it was able to capture people's imagination and get really talented folks involved and to build, try new things and experiment. The open source spirit, like really embracing the bizarre, I think is the most important piece here. Coding in the open, publishing often. I think there's a lot to be said for that, right? There's something, there's some folks who are kind of like building a rocket ship, right, alone in like Silicon Valley, like a Definity or something, and then once they grace us with their code and they're allow you to get involved in their community, like then it's going to be awesome, right? But like for some reason, like it never gets perfected, and you never can really get involved, and like so we're kind of waiting, and I'd argue just publish early and publish often. Like Kusama was a really good example. We launched the Kusama project last year, and it's not like it was some master plan. It was like, hey, we need to test some assumptions on Polkadot. We need to test it early, so let's launch this thing, give it the same Genesis block as Polkadot, and see what happens. And that has paid off, really well from a technological standpoint, a community driven standpoint, a market and economic standpoint. And it kind of has this self-generative feature where you get this feedback loop between like the Kusama network and the Polkadot network, right? That that you have the ability for these communities, these technologies, and these are economic machines to coordinate with one another and build off of one another's progress in a way that is really important. But it's really about allowing access. I got into crypto because I was hired out of like a Telegram, like a Discord chat, like basically. And it wasn't like I didn't send a resume. There wasn't like, and I think this is not an uncommon thing. And I'm not even a programmer, right? So people sometimes ask me, how do you get involved in crypto? And really, the community is not too big in some of these new ecosystems or some of these new like application ecosystems, maybe a little bit smaller, but maybe it's built on Ethereum, right? In the case of Wi-Fi, you can still get involved in a lot of different ways. But it behooves the founders of projects to allow access as early as possible and reward that publicly. Kind of taking the other two examples, right? So the kind of budding ecosystems, like there's a bunch of blockchain launches this year, and kudos to everyone who launched their blockchains or their applications this year. Two ones I want to spend a little bit more time with though is Filecoin and Protocol Labs, and Polkadot and Parity Technologies and Web3 Foundation. So what made those ecosystems it felt a little bit different. The market cap was certainly different. The number of contributors, like any measurement, right, in terms of developers, projects, is different than a lot of the other kind of L1, L0, whatever ecosystems. And I talked a little bit about this with the folks at ChainSafe, and because they see all these different ecosystems, right? So what kind of made these ones feel a little bit different this year? And then all these quantitative metrics. And some of it's just like the companies that put out Filecoin and put out Polkadot have been building open source tech for the better part of 5-7 years, and a lot of developers, a lot of people who are building the applications on top of these platforms have been using that open source technology in their code, whether they've known it or not, for a while, and a lot of them have known it. So in the case of Protocol Labs, you have on the networking layer, you have libp2p, you have IPLD, you have kind of this source cred, this credit system, right? For kind of reputation and identity. In Parity Technologies' case, these folks have been building blockchain technologies for 5-7 years. They've been open sourcing it as they go, and it's launched tons of other token projects and businesses into orbit, and that they haven't even commercialized, right? People commercialize the parity bridge, to create like side chains, and the Ethereum parity Ethereum client to build enterprise Ethereum clients and all this stuff, right? So there's like some innovativeness there to that, and there's some technical ability definitely towards that. There's that commitment to open source, and there's the and that's rewarded, like I think by the community at large, the world, that people want to get involved. I don't know. Does it make it means like they're doing it for the right reasons? I'm not sure, right? But it's there's a lot more substance there. There's a lot more scaffolding. It's not just you're launching this blockchain, this economic network to like because you can or to make money. It's like there's this larger, much larger vision. There's this much larger intent, and that comes through literally in published code and in projects that surround these blockchains. And there's no easy way. You can't hack your way to that, right? It's it's years of commitment and work. One thing, and this is, I was trying to capture, like, from Ethereum Foundation, there's many different teams that sprouted off of that, many different for-profit sustainable businesses, as well as kind of, more community organizations that maybe don't have a profit ability, but are able to sustain themselves through grants or whatnot, maybe like Geth or something. They all sprouted kind of from this early organization, right? And they were able to go off, use the grant funding, use ETH, whatever it was, to get alignment, but most specifically with the Ethereum network, from a philosophical standpoint and an economic standpoint, to build other organizations around it. And so you had Consensus, kind of, a venture studio that was, involved in the markets side of things and supporting the token, and then kind of supporting little offshoot projects. Some of them grew into really big projects, within Fura and some other ones. And then you have kind of these dev shops like Parity and Geth, and now a lot more now, kind of that have launched, Prismatic, obviously ChainSafe, and that are able to now support the ecosystem on a sustainable basis, right? And these are just some ones that were early that I remembered as I was like throwing this together. But there's like that decentralization when there is those multiple organizations, and ultimately organizations are made up of people, right? So there have to be people behind these. Like, it's a person who comes up with the idea and the name and the logo for these things, but and then like everyone's trying to get to Bitcoin, in the sense that this little graph here just shows that there's at the time this was published in March or May, there's 12 organizations spending over $1 million a year each on Bitcoin core development, right? So if each one's spending 1 million, which obviously from this graph they're not, but that's still $12 million. And if one of them goes bankrupt, it's 11 million, right? It's highly resilient. And it ends up being more than even like, a younger ecosystem like Polkadot or Filecoin, where it's maybe just 1-2 organizations spending maybe 10 or $15 million a year, and it ends up being less absolute capital, as well as less people and less than 12 different organizations, right? Bitcoin's already to that fully decentralized kind of community organizations bit, right? There's and people have tried to kind of centralize it with the Bitcoin Foundation and different things, but anyway, that's where we're all trying to get in terms of like the evangelists who go off and make their own businesses or make their own projects on the or around to support the original ecosystem blockchain. Last but not least, kind of how you get from the token distribution to like, okay, everybody knows what this is for. This is digital gold, right? And along the way, we went through many different ideas of what Bitcoin's meme would be. And, peer-to-peer cash that forked off into Bitcoin Cash. You had, kind of, faster transactions. You had all these things that had to go in different directions that couldn't be accommodated on the Bitcoin blockchain. like programmable money, like Mastercoin didn't work. So the Bitcoin Core guys told Vitalik to get lost. So we had to start Ethereum, right? And so some of it literally couldn't be accommodated on the Bitcoin blockchain. And you ended up with these forks, and you ended up with these new networks that try different assumptions. And that's fine too, to a certain extent. I could get into reasons why, kind of having a governance first blockchain that's able to accommodate more and be more flexible to accommodate more visions within one umbrella, like Polkadot, is really cool, right? I know I've been thinking about that a lot over the past couple of years, but sticking with this for a second, around the narrative and the meme, it takes a lot of different people taking the blockchain and the purpose and vision behind the blockchain in many different directions and trying different experiments for the community to come to some sort of soft consensus on what this thing is for. And the Headless Brands guys out of Berlin, or other internet guys out of Berlin, do a great job of this. Like if you're looking for articles on kind of the spirit of some of crypto and blockchain stuff, like I definitely recommend reading their blog. And I think Polkadot, Filecoin are still working on their memes, still working on their story and narrative, even though they're massive and top 10 coins, top 20 coins, whatever. It takes a while. It takes a decade and a lot of experimentation to get to where Bitcoin is. So thank you. And that's all I have. So these are just some ideas I've been thinking about and talking about with like the ChainSafe team and things that I wanted to share about why people care about joining a movement, an ecosystem, and I hope it was okay. So this is my Twitter and our website for Hypersphere. If there's any questions, be happy to answer. But thank you anyway.
Thanks, Jack. That was great. Big little clap for everybody. That honestly, like something that I think really stood out there that I think should be highlighted is like this idea of like shipping quick and lean, and like often. Kusama honestly was really successful in even just showing out like some minor an incentivized testnet. It's like incredible that it showed that testnets, people can care about them and help actually like dog food back the ecosystem, which is great.
Yeah, I was talking to someone yesterday who was like, Fabi from Parody, he was like, if we just called it Polkadot Lite and launched that with some like boring graphics, nobody would have cared, right? But it was like, it had Kusama, it was its own brand, and like back to Polkadot, this glitch thing, like it made people want to like, and they had the idea that it was something different, and people started to figure out like what the narrative was, and people are still figuring that out.
Yeah, no, it's awesome what good branding can do around that too. We do have a couple questions for you, so I do want to get those out to you. So we'll start from the top, go all the way to the bottom. What's one way you've seen the blockchain ecosystem capture non-technical or non-blockchain attention in the right way?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we can all kind of think about what the wrong way might be in terms of like going maybe a little bit too far into the markets and like the economic parts about the blockchain, which you can't get rid of. You have to have the economics part of the blockchain, right? But it can be unhealthy for sure. And so that's kind of like doing it maybe a little bit wrong if you have too much emphasis on just people making money and getting rich. But doing it right, I think the most important thing is linking it to a reason why. And I don't think any ecosystem has really done this even successfully, except for Bitcoin. Maybe with the exception of Ethereum, it's getting there. But Bitcoin's been able to capture people's imagination in the mainstream world about why it makes sense to have an inflation censorship resistant currency in their portfolio, and why that is not a pessimistic view on where humanity is going, but actually an optimistic view about human ingenuity to create new technologies, new stores of wealth, new means of exchange, and that's resonated with like random people, right, who just own Bitcoin as like the gateway drug into cryptocurrency. And so I think that's the only one. Ethereum has been pretty successful though, and I feel like is getting there. It just, I think it's going to take an application beyond just holding ETH to actually have to get like an actual critical mass of non-technical people to care. And that may be happening with DeFi, it may be happening with NFTs, but it's like, I do think it's going to take that killer app or whatever people always say to get non-technical people to care as much about Ethereum as they do about Bitcoin, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we're still a little ways out as well, but we're definitely getting close. Our next question here is, how can core contributors who are not in leadership positions help inspire change in an effort to improve an ecosystem?
Yeah, another really, really awesome question. So I think, I don't know as much like about the Ethereum and Bitcoin communities, to be honest, is like, it takes a lot of time to that's why Hypersphere is Polkadot focused, is it's just like, we don't have the bandwidth to like keep up with all the applications in every ecosystem. I have no idea how ChainSafe does it. Like, kudos to you guys. But talking a little bit about Polkadot is like, we have a council on Polkadot and Kusama that's open source, that people have to vote for you with their tokens to get on. And there's like anonymous people, at least on the Kusama one so far, that nobody knows. And they just have Twitter handles, and they're important stewards. So that's one way. But if you're a core contributor and you're like contributing to code, I think the most difficult thing is like we've played with this idea on Kusama or Polkadot of having a developer like UBI. So like where there's a dev team that's contracted by the blockchain to continue to do core development. And there's a little bit of an issue there, whereas if you are a productive enough developer to do core development for a layer one, you're probably not going to be working like on SL, like a service level agreement for a blockchain. You can probably launch your own layer one with a token and like capture more value. And that's what most people have done, which is unfortunate in some respects. But to the extent like a blockchain's able to pay market rate to core contributors to get involved, that would be like a quantum leap forward in to get more ingenuity around a blockchain ecosystem. Bitcoin right now is just grants, right? It's like the Human Rights Foundation, the Winklevoss twins, Paradigm Capital, and then those 12 core development shops I mentioned. They're just kind of giving grants or have some business somewhere else where they're capturing value. And they're not self-sustaining economic models because they can't take any of the block reward and push it into a treasury or into like discretionary spending, which is very, comes with other compromises around like capture and governance and different things, right? That a lot of people still haven't gotten over in certain communities, most particularly like Ethereum. But it's like an experiment that's worth trying. Like, can you get paid by the blockchain basically? Can you, and we'll see.
Yeah, no, that's a really good, pretty sound answer. definitely a lot of problems, and it's just like we see it every day, so we got to see how that goes. But thank you so much again, Jack. Really appreciated it. Thank you for coming out to CSCON, and I'll let you go so you can get back to your day, and super excited to announce our next speaker.
Thanks, ChainSafe. Bye, Greg.
Thanks, Jack. Awesome. Oh, are we frozen? No, we're good. Awesome. Our next speaker, I'm super excited to announce, as I've had the fortune to work with him quite frequently in the past. He's a senior software engineer at Centrifuge, MiguelHervas, and he's here to talk to us today about how Centrifuge uses Chainbridge to fuel DeFi and Centrifuge Tinlake. And Miguel, you should be able to unmute your microphone and join us on stage.
All right, can you hear me?
Yep, all good. Stage is yours, and have a great time.
Great, thank you, Greg. Awesome, so yeah, thanks ChainSafe for having me or giving me a little bit of time to present a bit of Centrifuge on this event. And yeah, as Greg mentioned, I'm going to talk about how Centrifuge bridges assets to fuel the DeFi ecosystem. Let me just share my screen first. All right. Can you see the screen? Is everything looking okay? We can get a thumbs up from somewhere. Awesome. Great. Yeah, a little bit of about myself, I think first. Yeah, my name is Miguel Hervas. I am a software engineer at Centrifuge, where I've been working as a founding engineer since day one. I am currently driving the efforts of the Centrifuge chain, the peer-to-peer protocol, and the DevOps or operations within the team. This is my email, so if anyone wants to drop me a line, please do so. And yeah, let me just briefly introduce Centrifuge. Centrifuge is a Berlin-based company. We're bringing real-world assets such as invoice of mortgages to the some decentralized finance protocols. So ultimately, from one side, companies can borrow stable coins on these assets, and from the other side, we allow investors to provide liquidity to the system in exchange of interesting yields. So yeah, that is what we do. And today I will briefly talk about the Centrifuge architecture and a use case for an asset originator, which I will explain in a moment. All right, so let's just jump to our architecture. So this is a bit of a simplistic form of seeing the Centrifuge architecture, but I think it will do well. And I would like to split this in layers or building blocks. And the first layer that first layer is basically what we call the protocol. And the protocol comprises the Centrifuge peer-to-peer network that you can see here, and the Centrifuge chain. And just to elaborate a little bit on what each of these ones do, the peer-to-peer network is the layer that takes care of sharing data between all the participants that are allowed in a secure and private manner. We provide as well access control for who is able to share what or which fields can you see on those documents that we share back and forth, which becomes very useful later on to build applications on top just to see, okay, if I share this document to someone else, this someone else can only modify or view certain fields, then you can build more complex applications on top, which will be very handy later on. And then this feeds or communicates with the Centrifuge chain. And the Centrifuge chain holds the main three entities at the moment, which is anchors, which the anchors are a fingerprint hash of the content of one of these documents that is flowing through the network. And then registries, NFT registries, to mint or convert these documents into an NFT that then later on we can use it in DeFi protocols, and identities. I forgot to mention that actually the Centrifuge chain is developed in Parity substrate, so eventually will become a parachain in the Polkadot ecosystem. Yeah, so then if we jump to the other side, we have the applications or the dApps, and in this case we have TeamLake, which is our first dApp that built on top of this protocol that is in charge of basically integrating or communicating these NFTs and locking them into some DeFi protocols like Maker. And what you can see here in the middle is the bridge. And this bridge is basically the piece that connects both chains together. And if you have seen I think a few days back, Paulina from ChainSafe did a 101 about the chain bridge. So we're basically using that component. And we currently allow moving fungible and non-fungible tokens, as well as arbitrary message passing or generic transfers from this chain. So this is what is making possible the communication between us in the Centrifuge chain to other protocols in other chains, in particular in Ethereum. Here we can see as well a bunch of other actors, lenders, and asset originators. So for this particular use case, I'm going to focus on the latter, on the asset originator. Yeah. So if we move to the next one, here is a quick overview of this particular use case I'm going to talk about, and it shows how the protocol and TeamLake plays together. But let me just maybe explain what is an asset originator. Here is just a general term that describes an entity that can provide an asset, a document that can be priced, and then later on you could potentially borrow stable coins out of this asset. So as an example, of course, if you make shoelaces in your company, and then you sell the shoelaces to a shoemaker, and you when you send the actual goods, so your laces to them, you send an invoice with them, and this invoice is basically the contract that states when are you going to pay, how much you're going to pay. So this is the actual, in our particular use case here, it will be an invoice, and that's the actual asset. So then this asset, you can, in the traditional marketplace, I can go and get some financing, something very well known as factoring. But in the centrifuge case, we are doing what we do. Basically, we share this asset with an underwriter, or part of the asset, to be more precise. There are certain fields that the underwriter needs to know to be able to price this asset in a way that then later on TeamLake is able to convert or lock this asset in exchange for DAI as me as the asset originator. So I could borrow DAI based on the price of this NFT as soon as I can lock it into TeamLake as collateral. And then of course there's a cycle of like you create an NFT, mint an NFT, create an NFT, and then lock it into a pool. Then after my cycle is closed, then of course I can borrow the DAI, and after my cycle is closed, I just basically have to repay the loan. And then here at the bottom, you can see the investors, and this is just the other side of the spectrum. So investors can invest in these pools, so you get an interesting return. But I'm not going to get too deep into this one today. So let me just go a little bit of the use case. I was not very comfortable doing this live, so I chose to do this through just basically screenshots. So forgive me about it. But yeah, so the first step that you need to do anything with centrifuge is to interact with the protocol, and for that we have enabled a UI. This is called Gateway, and to be able to interact with the protocol without abstracting a little bit of the complexities of it. Of course, you could always run this on your own, run your own centrifuge nodes, and you don't have to, have anyone as your centralized authority. But in this case, for adoption, we had this front end. So for this demo, I use Amber testnet, and this is connected to Coven, and to Amber, of course, our centrifuge chain network. So first of all, simple to just register yourself with your email and password. And the underlying actions that are happening is that the centrifuge node that is connected to this UI will create a centrifuge identity. And this centrifuge identity is created on Ethereum at the moment, and it follows the ERC 725 standard. So we could store certain keys or public keys associated with this identity to sign files or verify that some other participants sign files with the keys that they associated to identity, resolve peers, and open secure tunnels in the peer-to-peer network. So assuming that I created the account correctly, then I will see something like, this. Oops, something's going on with my presentation. One second, technical problems. Oh, still. I'm gonna try and present again. Maybe through here, it's easier. All right, let's see if that works now. All right. Oh, can you see the screen flickering, right? Can I get some feedback? Someone? We saw the screen. Yeah, I couldn't tell. My screen was doing something crazy right now. All right, I wish. How can I hide this? Yeah, I don't know if you can see this screen. Actually, it's too small, probably, right? Without presenting it.
Hey, it looks like you're not sharing anymore.
Yeah.
It's fine. I think try maybe being specific and just doing a tab. That's been very successful.
Just only a tab. I think I did that.
Or maybe the whole window.
Yeah, maybe that. Right. Yeah, maybe the whole window is a bit better. Let's see.
There we go.
All right.
Cool.
Let's see if this works.
I can see it on my end, full screen.
I don't know why this is just suddenly flickering.
Perhaps just not doing it in presentation mode.
Right.
Just a lot of people have done that. It's worked well. Just make sure you scale in if you want to zoom in, and just yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I don't know if you guys can see much. Can you see a little bit briefly? Yeah.
On my side, it's perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Then I'll continue. Sorry for that setback. So yeah, if you logged in correctly, then you will be able to see something like this, and it is basically you will see you just created the account, so you will not have any documents. But if you have documents, you will see something like this. So then when you click on create document here on the right, what will what you will come to this other screen, and you can input here any arbitrary values based on a schema that you have created previously that you can see here on top, the Amber test Oracle v2 that we used for our testnet. And these schemas are just a template that tells the document, or it forces certain rules to the document, in addition to pre-fill some data for you, so you don't have to do it every single time. One interesting aspect here is the collaborator section, and the collaborator section is what when you create this document, you can choose with which participant of the centrifuge network you want to share it with, and with which fields you want them to see, which fields they don't want you to see, or do you want them to see? Sorry, and all that. So if we when we click on save this document, what will happen is that this will be shared securely with these collaborators using the peer-to-peer network, and then the document will be anchored in the centrifuge chain. So out of the fields of the document, we will create of course, these fields are leaves will become leaves of a tree, and then we create a Merkle tree out of those, and then we store the root hash of this into the centrifuge chain anchor registry associated to a document identifier. So if we create the document, you will see something like this, where, as you can see here, there's another collaborator that you didn't know about before that was coming from the schema, and this, in our use case, is the underwriter. So as you know, the underwriter is the one that is taking the risk on pricing this or potentially on pricing this document, and this you can see them as an oracle in the system. So so then the next stage what we want to do here is to actually convert or mint an NFT out of this document, and then we just basically click on edit here on the right, and then we have this pop-up. And this pop-up will just specify which register you want to mint against, and the deposit address, so who's going to be the owner of this NFT. So I'm using a MetaMask account, or an account that I'm handling with MetaMask, and this is the address. So then when I click on mint NFT, boom, the NFT is minted. And you can see here that we have a token identifier, registry, and the owner. But let's just jump on what happened underneath, because that's actually one of the most interesting things of this talk is making sure that we involve what does the chain bridge component do in all this. So as you know, we minted an NFT in the centrifuge chain. The centrifuge chain is a parity substrate chain. So we can go to the Polkadot apps if you are a bit familiar with them, and then you can see what happened at this time frame for that particular extrinsic. So what the centrifuge node that is connected to this UI did was create an extrinsic that we call the NFT validate mint. And this validate mint basically bundles a bunch of proofs associated to this document. So then the registry, the NFT registry that we want to mint against, applies certain business rules. So for example, if there's a signer associated to this document, or a collaborator associated to this document has signed the document, that's a check that we do. Then if all these proofs are valid, and of course the Merkle root of these proofs match with the one stored on chain, then it will trigger some events. So basically, it will trigger some events that they will be fetched and listened by the chain bridge. So these events, for example, you can see here this chain bridge generic transfer, and this basically is the generic arbitrary message definition for chain bridge. And you can see a couple of things here, like for example the chain ID, which is the target chain ID, which in this case is Ethereum. Then a deposit node, which is how many transactions have been happening for this palette in the substrate side, and then a resource ID. And this resource ID is an interesting value because it maps this arbitrary hex or byte array to a contract, smart contract, and function in Ethereum or in the target chain. That would basically, the resource ID will be given meaning only in the target chain. And then the bytes that are basically the payload. So this payload that is passed to this target function that is resolved out of the resource ID. So if you know a bit of how the chain bridge works, there is relayers, and these relayers listen to these events in those chains, and then do a small processing, and then write to the target chains according to whatever rules each of the connector adapter has. So here I'm going to show as well, I think, an example of how currently in our version of the chain bridge it works. And we have in our systems, in this particular case, it's our testnet. So in mainnet we have quite a few more, but in our testnet we have 3 different relayers that you can see here. I hope maybe you can, I don't know if you can see much the numbers, but then there's 3 different relayers, and as the chain bridge consensus works on the target chain is based on proposal and voting and execution. So if these 3 will pick up the event more or less at the same time, of course with variations, and then the first one that arrives and proposes is this one, the first one you can see here, propose the move of this asset. Then the next one will basically identify there's a proposal, then I'm going to vote for it. So that other relayer votes for it, and since we, and since we have, I don't know what's going on with my computer. Yep, I'm having the same problem again, but now in this setup. So 1 second, stay with me.
On my end. Hey, Miguel, it looks fine on my end.
Yeah, it's so weird because I cannot see. I basically cannot. Everything just drops to the last slide for me, so I cannot see where I'm at. Anyways, now it's okay. So yeah, basically the next voting that comes, it will fail mainly because we have a 66% voting threshold. So 2 out of 3. So these 3, the next one that comes, then the voting is closed already, it fails, as you can see here as the third from the bottom. And then the next one is execution. So the first one that identifies that the voting has passed, then it will execute, and the rest will attempt to do the same thing, and it will fail. This is something that has been trying to be fixed. I think there's a lot of work to improve the verbosity of it, and I'm having trouble again with my slides. So this is a bit annoying. I don't understand why. I know you might be able to see it, but I cannot. All right. Anyways, so then the last execution will basically mint the NFT, and then I have my MetaMask that's associated to the NFT, and I can see that the NFT was minted on my account. Great. So now I have an NFT, so I can recap a little bit on what happened till now. At this point, we have created an NFT out of a document, of an invoice. Some underwriter has priced this document, and we have moved this this NFT from the Centrifuge chain to Ethereum, and it's in a well-known registry that then we can try to open a loan in TeamLake. So I really briefly mentioned before, but TeamLake allows for like a real-world asset to be financed. In our case, this real-world asset is the invoice, and that we just minted. So for this demo part, I used again Coven staging for TeamLake, but of course this is not very exciting in terms of data that is flowing. Something much more exciting is to go to the live site in TeamLake, and you can see what are the open pools, how much of them are financed. What is the rates that have used that have been set, and the type of assets that are flowing. But yeah, for now, so I'm gonna go to the Coven version of it, which is pretty boring, but it will just show equally good the use case. So here we can see a bunch of in this case 3 revolving pools, or 2 revolving pools that are one is open and the other one is upcoming, and the other one is closed. So here, the main things to look at here is, okay, you can select a pool that is for this type of assets. In this case, it's an invoice. You can see information about how much DAI has been put into these pools or financed through these pools. And then if you are coming from the investor side, what is the APR? So if you're an investor and you want to see, maybe it's interesting for me to invest in these pools, then you can click on it, and then you will be able to see something like this. And here it tells a variety of things that the most interesting ones are the drop token rates, which is a Centrifuge token, and that is used by investors. And then you have as well the pool value and the pool reserve. So all these fields, you can read more about it on our site. So I'm not gonna get too deep into that. But then as well, you can see information about the asset originator. This is a testing one, so there's nothing exciting here, but it will tell like what is the average size of the invoice that they go through, the payment terms, or the maturity date for these invoices, and then you can as well use this as for you as maybe as an investor to do your own due diligence to identify if it's safe for you to invest on these assets. Yeah, so then me, as going back, I am the asset originator, so I want to put some assets into this pool. So if I click on assets here on the top, I will be directed to something like this. And here you have to input your the NFT registry using the token ID that was minted, and then if everything is read correctly, then you will see a bunch of data here. This is very simple one, so there's no metadata associated with it, but you can see the NFT ID and the registry and the owner. And then just as simple as open financing. When you click on open financing, then you will basically be locking this NFT into the smart contracts of TeamLake for this particular revolving pool. And as you can see here, this number 35 is the one that just added. And we had a problem in our testnet, so I couldn't show exactly what was the price that was the price and the available financing that was done by the underwriter. But here you will see, if let's say our invoice was $150, here you could perfectly see something like $135. that they allow for you to borrow later on. And this is the financing fee, which is basically the APR that you will be paying by just borrowing this money. So so at this point, I lock the NFT into the Tingley contracts, and then you can see that my NFT is not in my domain anymore. And then after that, what I can do for the next stage is to actually borrow some stable coins. Here, you can click on the asset ID, and it will open up a screen very similar to this, where you will be able to see a button where you say borrow. And this one is very interesting because you can tell, for example, this by the way, this screenshot is from a different document, because I was not able to test this out yesterday and capture the screenshots. But the main thing here is that that